The hallway of the Piedmont Grand Hotel smelled like gardenias and champagne. Naomi Warren stood in a beaded cocktail dress outside Suite 4, holding an envelope she had carried for 3 days. Inside that envelope were 8 months of bank statements proving her fiancé had been draining her salary into an account she had never seen. She had come to confront Marcus before tomorrow's wedding. She had not come to find her sister in his bed. The door was not locked. Marcus sat up first. Keisha did not bother to move. "Naomi, baby, this is not 11 months, Keisha said, pulling the sheet to her collarbone without urgency. Might as well hear it from me. Behind Naomi, the elevator opened. Gerald Warren stepped out with Diane beside him, both dressed for the rehearsal dinner downstairs. Gerald looked at the open door, at the bed, at his daughter's face. And then he said the sentence that ended 27 years of obedience. "Close that door, Naomi. You are embarrassing this family. Not Marcus, not Keisha, Naomi." She looked at her father, and in his eyes, she saw something worse than anger. She saw calculation. He already knew. To understand why Naomi Warren walked 8 miles through Atlanta that night without calling a single person, you need to understand the rule that governed her entire life. In the Warren household, silence was worth more than any daughter. Naomi's mother, Evelyn, died when Naomi was 14. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late, treated poorly, mourned quietly. Gerald buried his wife on a Tuesday and returned to the office on Wednesday. Grief, in his vocabulary, was a distraction. 2 years later, Gerald married Diane, a woman who understood exactly what the Warren name was worth and how to position herself inside it. Diane brought Keisha, her daughter from a previous relationship, into the family with the precision of a campaign manager installing a candidate. Keisha was charming, photogenic, and socially fluent. Naomi was quiet, competent, and inconvenient. At 16, Naomi was sent to live with her grandmother in rural Georgia for 2 years. Gerald called it space for the new family to settle. Naomi called it exile, but never said so out loud. When she returned at 20, she went straight to work at Warren Construction, the company her father ran. She was efficient. She solved problems. She never complained. And she cooked, every night, from memory, the recipes her mother had written in a small leather notebook that smelled like cinnamon and old paper. That notebook was the only inheritance Evelyn left behind that Gerald could not convert into equity. Marcus Cole appeared 3 years ago, a real estate broker with a wide smile and the kind of confidence that fills a room without earning it. Gerald approved immediately. Marcus was manageable. He asked permission. He wore the right suits. He laughed at Gerald's jokes. The engagement felt less like a proposal and more like a merger. And Naomi, who had spent her entire life waiting for her father to look at her with something other than assessment, mistook his approval of Marcus for approval of her. The night of the hotel, Naomi tried to solve the situation the way she had been trained, quietly and alone. She called the bank. Marcus had moved $43,000 from their joint account into one registered to Keisha Warren. She called the management company for her apartment. The lease was in Gerald's name. She called her closest friend from college. The call went to voicemail. She found out later that Gerald had already called to explain that Naomi had caused a scene and that the family was handling it. In the span of 4 hours, Gerald Warren dismantled his daughter's life with the efficiency of a man demolishing a building he owned. The car was repossessed. The corporate card was canceled. The apartment locks were changed by morning. Naomi had the dress she was wearing, a handbag she had grabbed from the car, and the envelope full of bank statements that no longer mattered to anyone but her. She walked, past the hotel valets who had watched her leave, past the parking garage where her car had been, past the rehearsal dinner she was supposed to attend, where 300 guests were already being told that the wedding was postponed due to a family matter. 8 miles through Atlanta in heels she eventually carried. She stopped at a loading dock behind a commercial building adjacent to the hotel, not because she chose it, but because her legs chose it for her. A man was sitting on the concrete steps of the service entrance, eating from a plastic container. He wore a maintenance uniform. The sleeves were rolled to the elbows, and even in the dim light, Naomi could see the burn scars, thick, textured, running from both wrists past his elbows and climbing the left side of his neck. He had watched the scene from the hotel steps 2 hours earlier. The woman thrown out, the father pointing, the sister smiling from the lobby window. He did not ask what happened. "The kitchen inside has hot coffee," he said, "and a door that locks from the inside." Naomi looked at him, a stranger with scars offering a locked door to a woman with nowhere to go. It should have frightened her. Instead, it was the first sentence anyone had said to her that night that did not contain a command. She accepted. Inside the building, they passed an older woman climbing the stairs slowly, carrying a bag of groceries. She looked at Naomi's dress, at her bare feet, at the mascara dried on her cheeks, and then at the man. "Elijah, the service room on 3 is empty. The girl needs a night. No questions, no forms, no explanations." Naomi slept on a thin mattress in a room that smelled like detergent and old wood. It was the first night in 27 years that no one expected anything from her. The building was called the Langford, a 4-story brick walk-up in Old Fourth Ward that housed 11 tenants, a laundry room that worked on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and a ground-floor kitchen that Miss Adelaide Turner, 68, had converted into a community dining room 9 years ago. She cooked for the elderly tenants who could not cook for themselves. She fed the night shift workers from the hospital across the street. She did not advertise. People simply knew. Naomi stayed 1 night, then 2. On the 3rd morning, she walked into the kitchen and began cooking. She did not ask permission. She washed her hands, opened the refrigerator, and started working with what was there: onions, chicken thighs, rice, a jar of peach preserves that had been sitting untouched on the top shelf. By noon, 11 plates were ready. Miss Addie tasted the chicken and set her fork down slowly. "That's not restaurant food," she said. "That's somebody's mother." Naomi did not answer. She served the plates. Within a week, the kitchen had a rhythm. Naomi cooked breakfast and lunch. Miss Addie handled the evening. Neighbors who had never eaten downstairs started appearing. A construction worker from 2 blocks over brought his daughter. A retired postal carrier started coming every morning with his own coffee mug. And Elijah, quiet, careful Elijah, began eating at the table instead of on the steps outside. He never said the food was good. He simply kept coming back. Naomi learned Elijah the way you learn a building: by what creaks at night. He fixed everything: a leaking pipe on the 2nd floor, a window frame that would not close, the laundry machine that shook violently during the spin cycle. His hands were precise and patient despite the scar tissue that made gripping difficult. He paid his rent in labor. He spoke to Miss Addie with respect and to everyone else with economy. He never removed his long sleeves in front of anyone. At night, Naomi heard him through the wall. Not words, sounds, the muffled groan of someone biting fabric to keep from screaming, the creak of a bed frame as spasms moved through damaged nerves. She recognized the sound of hidden pain. She had been listening to her own version of it for years. On the 5th night, she mixed shea butter with eucalyptus oil and calendula, a remedy her mother used to make for neighbors with arthritis. She placed the jar on his doorstep and knocked once, then walked away. The jar was empty by morning. She made another, and another. On the 8th night, he opened the door while she was still standing there. "You don't have to do this. I know. The scars don't get better. Neither does eating alone. But you still come to the table." He looked at her for a long time. Then he stepped aside. She entered the apartment. Small, clean, nothing on the walls. And for the first time, she applied the salve directly, her hands on his forearms, working the tissue the way you work dough, slowly, with pressure that respected the resistance. He did not speak. His jaw was locked, but he did not pull away. The first dinner they shared alone, Naomi set 3 plates. Elijah looked at the empty setting. Who's the third one for? Whoever needs it. He studied her face. Your mother? Anyone. My mother started it. She said a proper table is never full, it's ready. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not a wall coming down. A window opening, just slightly, to check if the air outside was safe. 2 weeks after Naomi arrived at the Langford, Keisha Warren posted a photograph on social media. A long table, white linen, candles. The caption read, Keisha's Table, Southern Cuisine, Original Recipes, Private Events. The menu featured peach-glazed chicken, brown butter cornbread, and a bourbon sweet potato soup that Naomi recognized immediately. Every dish was Evelyn's. Keisha had taken the notebook. When Gerald's people cleared Naomi's apartment, Keisha had gone through the bedroom. She found the leather-bound recipe book in the nightstand drawer, beneath a photograph of Evelyn at a church picnic. She took the book and left the photograph. Naomi discovered this through Miss Addie, who had seen the article shared in a neighborhood group. She sat on the kitchen floor for 20 minutes without moving. Then she stood up, washed her hands, and began cooking. 3 dishes, then 5, then 8. The counter filled with food no one had ordered. 1. Miss Addie walked in, surveyed the chaos, and sat down. When your mother was upset, she did the exact same thing. Naomi stopped. You knew my mother? Evelyn Carter, before she was Evelyn Warren. She cooked at the Founders Day picnic for First Emmanuel Church in 2004. Best peach cobbler I ever had in my life. I told her she had a gift from God, and she told me God had nothing to do with it. It was her grandmother's cast iron skillet. Addie paused. I also knew a man named Gerald Odom. He attended the same church, built things with his hands, like somebody else I know. Naomi felt the kitchen tilt. Odom. That was the old name, the company. Before my father changed it. Addie said nothing. She let the silence work. Miss Addie, how long have you known who Elijah is? Since the day he moved in. He has his father's hands and his father's habit of hiding pain behind work. She looked at Naomi directly. I've been waiting for someone with strong enough hands to open that door. I wasn't sure it would be you. But your mother's daughter was always the best candidate. That night, Naomi was applying the salve to Elijah's forearms when she asked the question she could no longer hold. What is your full name? The muscles beneath her hands went rigid. Elijah Odom. She did not remove her hands. Odom, like the name that used to be on my father's building. Not like it. It is the same name. My father founded that company. His name was James. Your father was his junior partner. Naomi's hands kept moving, not because she was calm, because stopping would mean admitting the ground beneath her had opened. Her fingers worked the scar tissue while her mind rearranged every memory she had of her father's office. The framed photographs on the wall, the company history page that began with Gerald Warren, 2015, as though nothing existed before. What happened to your father? Elijah told her. Gerald Odom founded Odom and Associates with $20,000 and a reputation for building things that lasted. Gerald Warren came in as the business side, contracts, financing, expansion. The company grew. Gerald pushed for a large commercial renovation downtown. James warned that the budget was too thin for proper safety compliance. Gerald signed the safety certifications anyway, falsifying the electrical inspection reports to keep the project on schedule. The fire started in the wiring on a Thursday afternoon. Elijah was 23, working the site alongside his father. James ran back into the structure to pull out 2 workers trapped on the 2nd floor. He did not come out. Elijah went in after him. He saved the workers. He could not save his father. The ceiling came down on his arms and shoulders. 11 months in a burn unit. 26 surgeries. When he woke up after the 3rd surgery, Gerald's lawyer was already sitting by the bed. An agreement, a non-disclosure, a settlement paid into an account Elijah could not access until he signed away every right to investigate, litigate, or speak publicly about the fire. 23 years old. Burned alone, no lawyer, no family member present. His grandmother had been told he was recovering privately and preferred solitude. He signed. Gerald renamed the company within the year. Every photograph of James Odom was removed from the office. The fire was classified as an electrical accident. The settlement money ran out in 3 years, most of it consumed by medical bills the insurance did not cover. Elijah disappeared into maintenance work, small apartments, long sleeves, and silence. 11 years. Naomi listened to all of it. Her hands did not stop. When he finished, she asked one question. Did he know it was dangerous? Elijah looked at her. Your father signed the inspection reports knowing they were falsified. I saw the documents before I signed the agreement. They made me return every copy. Naomi kept working the salve into his arms. The smell of eucalyptus filled the small apartment. Outside, a siren passed. She understood now. The company, the house, the cars, the hotel, the wedding, the life, all of it was built on the night this man lost his father and his skin. I need you to know something, she said. I'm not leaving. You should. Probably, but I'm not. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Naomi's life. She carried 2 truths simultaneously. The man she was learning to love had been destroyed by the man who raised her, and the man who raised her had built everything she once called home on a lie she could no longer afford to keep. She went to the community clinic on Auburn Avenue. Dr. Miriam Kalu, a burn specialist who volunteered there on Wednesdays, agreed to teach her. 12 hours over 3 visits, deep tissue technique for chronic burn contractures, nerve pain management, range of motion exercises. At the end of the last session, Dr. Kalu held Naomi's arm. Patients like your husband, long pain, long shame. Some of them develop a habit. When the nerve pain becomes unbearable, they create a different pain to drown it. A cut, a burn, something they control. If you ever find a locked door and silence, do not leave him alone. Do you hear me? Never alone. Naomi heard her. She returned to the Langford that evening. Elijah was furious. She had been gone 12 hours without explanation. He accused her of leaving. She showed him her hands, raw from practice on simulation models, and said, I learned where it hurts. Now lie down. The first time she applied the clinical technique, he gripped the mattress so hard the frame groaned. The second night, he managed to breathe through it. By the 4th night, he slept, actually slept, for the first time in months. But the silence between them had changed. Naomi now knew who he was and what her father had done. Elijah now knew that as she knew, and neither of them had said what that meant for everything between them. The fracture came on a Tuesday. Naomi found, in a stack of old mail Elijah kept in a shoebox, the original NDA. His signature, shaky, medicated, barely legible. The witness line was signed by Gerald Warren's personal attorney. The date was 9 days after the fire. 9 days. You knew who I was from the beginning, she said. The night at the hotel. My name was on the envelope I was holding. Elijah did not deny it. Warren, I saw it. Yes. You let me move in. You let me cook for you. You let me touch your scars. And you never told me that my father is the reason you have them. If I had told you the first night, you would have left. You don't know that. I know what everyone else did. The apartment was very quiet. Naomi picked up the jar of salve from the table, placed it on his doorstep, outside, and closed the door between them. For 2 days, neither spoke. The third plate at dinner sat empty. And for the first time, it felt like absence, not invitation. Gerald, meanwhile, had found them. His attorney traced Naomi's new bank account to the Langford's address. When Gerald saw the name Elijah Odom in the building's tenant records, his reaction was immediate. He called the building's owner, a man who owed Warren Construction for a renovation debt, and delivered an ultimatum: evict Elijah and shut down the community kitchen, or the debt comes due in full within 30 days. Simultaneously, Diane secured Keisha a catering contract for the most prestigious event in Atlanta's Black community, the annual benefit dinner hosted by Ruth Odom, matriarch of the original Odom family, at the historic First Emmanuel Church. If Ruth Odom's event featured Keisha's food, it would legitimize the stolen recipes permanently. And Gerald calculated it would neutralize any future connection between Naomi and the Odom name. What Gerald did not know was that Miss Addie attended First Emmanuel, that Miss Addie had Ruth Odom's personal phone number, and that Miss Addie had already carried a container of Naomi's peach dessert to Ruth's kitchen 2 days earlier. Ruth tasted it, set the spoon down, closed her eyes. That's Evelyn Carter's hand. It's her daughter's hand now, Addie said. And her daughter is taking care of someone you've been looking for. Ruth did not need to hear the name. She had kept an empty chair at her dining table for 11 years. She knew exactly who Addie meant. Naomi made her decision on the morning she learned about the eviction threat. She did not go to Gerald. She went to the building owner and asked, calmly, exactly how much was owed. She went to Dr. Kalu and requested Elijah's medical records, with his written authorization, documenting the burns, their origin, and the 11 years of untreated chronic pain. She went to Miss Addie and asked for one thing, the invitation to Ruth Odom's benefit dinner. And she went to the kitchen. She cooked the dish her mother never wrote down. Evelyn's finishing dessert, the peach creation that changed with every season, that existed only in hands and memory, never on paper. The recipe that proved inheritance was not a notebook. It was a body of knowledge passed from skin to skin. Then she went to Elijah's door. The salve was still on the doorstep, untouched. She knocked. He opened. I haven't forgiven you, she said. But I understand you, and you're coming to that dinner with me. Because your grandmother kept a chair empty for 11 years. She won't want to see me like this. She'll want to see you anyway at all. The night before the dinner, Naomi heard silence from Elijah's room. She remembered Dr. Kalu's words. She knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. She did not leave. She walked to the kitchen, took a glass from the shelf, and broke it against her own palm, and then she pressed her bleeding hand to the door. Elijah, I cut myself. There's blood. He opened the door in 3 seconds. He looked at her hand, then at her face. You did that on purpose. It was the only key that opened this door. He broke, not dramatically. The way a man breaks who has held himself rigid for 11 years and finally meets a force that will not stop pushing. She bandaged her own hand first, and then his. They sat on the bathroom floor together, blood and salve mixing on the tiles. No more locked doors, she said. We fight your soldiers together. The morning of Ruth Odom's benefit dinner at First Emmanuel Church. 300 guests, the most influential families in Atlanta's Black community. Gerald and Diane arrived early, positioned near the front. Keisha set up her catering station with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned. Chef Lorraine Banks, food critic, cookbook author, and the woman who had documented Evelyn Carter's cooking at a church festival 20 years ago, sat at the head table. Ruth had invited her personally. Naomi and Elijah arrived last. She pushed his chair up the ramp herself. The murmuring began immediately. Gerald saw them from across the room. He did not move. He could not. The dinner proceeded. Keisha's food was served. Chef Lorraine tasted the peach-glazed chicken, set her fork down, and looked across the room. She did not speak yet. She watched. Then Naomi stood. She walked to the kitchen. She asked the church staff for 20 minutes and a stove. She prepared the finishing dessert, peaches, brown butter, a whisper of bourbon, and the technique that no notebook could capture because it lived in timing, in pressure, in the way Evelyn taught her daughter to listen to the pan. She carried the plates out herself. Lorraine tasted it, closed her eyes. There she is, Lorraine said. 20 years and I never forgot that hand. Evelyn Carter cooked at the Founders' Day celebration in 2004. I wrote about her. What I'm tasting right now is the same tradition, but it's grown. It's matured. She looked at Keisha. What you served tonight are Evelyn's recipes. I recognized them immediately. But this, she gestured to Naomi's dessert. This is what a recipe becomes when it's carried by the person it was meant for. You have the words, child. She has the language. Keisha's face collapsed. She memorized it from my mother's. Your mother, Naomi said quietly, could not boil water, Keisha. And this recipe is not in any notebook. It's in the hands. The room shifted. 300 people recalibrated. Gerald stood. Naomi, enough. You've destroyed enough for one lifetime. Ruth Odom rose from her chair. The room went silent. Mr. Warren, before you speak about destruction in my church, explain to this room why the company that carried my son's name for 20 years now carries yours. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Elijah moved forward. He did not hide. He did not shout. His voice was steady, the steadiness of a man who had rehearsed this moment in locked rooms for 11 years and finally had a reason to open the door. My name is Elijah Odom. James Odom was my father. He died in a fire on a construction site 11 years ago. I was there. These scars are from the same fire. He looked at Gerald. The safety inspection reports for that site were falsified. My father warned that the wiring was dangerous. The reports were signed anyway. I saw the documents before I was made to sign them away, in a hospital bed. 9 days after the fire, without a lawyer, without my family, without anyone who could have told me I had a choice. Ruth spoke. The investigator I hired 6 years ago is present tonight. The original fire inspection reports, the real ones, have been with my attorney since Monday. I have waited 11 years for my grandson to be willing to speak. Tonight, he speaks. Gerald reached for Diane. Diane was already moving toward the exit. Keisha had vanished. Ruth walked to Elijah. She looked at his hands, the scarred, capable hands that had fixed pipes and window frames and held Naomi's bleeding palm on a bathroom floor. I thought I lost you the way I lost your father. I was here, Grandma. I just didn't know how to come back. Ruth turned to Naomi. She removed a ring from her own finger, a gold band that had been in the Odom family for 4 generations. She placed it in Naomi's hand. The woman who brought my grandson home when no one else was looking has a seat at this table for the rest of her life. Gerald Warren was not arrested that night. Justice, when it involves falsified safety records, wrongful death, coerced non-disclosure agreements, and 11 years of institutional silence, does not arrive in a single scene. It arrives in depositions, in subpoenas, in the slow machinery of accountability that Gerald had spent 11 years believing he had outrun. The investigators submitted the original fire reports to the district attorney's office the following morning. The NDA was challenged in court, signed under duress, without legal representation, by a hospitalized patient with acute burn. Warren Construction faced a formal safety audit. The company Gerald built on James Odom's foundation began to answer for what that foundation had cost. The magazine profile of Keisha's table was pulled. The notebook of Evelyn's recipes was returned. Keisha left it on the kitchen counter of the Langford without a note. Marcus called Naomi's new number once. She did not answer. A week later, Naomi and Elijah were still at the Langford. Ruth offered them the family house. They declined. When we're ready, Elijah said. Ruth understood. She had not survived 78 years by rushing the things that mattered. Naomi received one phone call from Gerald. She answered. He did not apologize. He was not yet capable of it. He said 5 words. Your mother would be ashamed. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. She would. She hung up. It was not reconciliation. It was not forgiveness. It was the smallest possible acknowledgement from a man standing at the edge of everything he had built, looking down at the crack that had always been there. Evening at the Langford. Naomi set the table. 3 plates. Elijah walked in, drying his hands on a towel. He looked at the empty setting. Who's the third one for? Naomi looked at him. For the first time, the answer was not grief. I don't know yet, but it'll be ready. He smiled. It was not a large smile. It was the kind of expression that costs 11 years and a bathroom floor to earn. On the table beside the plates sat a leather notebook and a jar of salve. Naomi's hand, the one with the scar from the glass she broke to reach him, rested on the table next to his hand, where the scars from the fire her father caused still mapped every nerve. The kitchen was small, the light was warm, the chair was empty, and the table was ready.